Greensburg, Kansas doesn't exist anymore. Not really. Not the version that stood on May 4th, 2007, at 9 o'clock at night. 95% of that town got wiped off the map in 1 hour and 2 minutes. And yet only 11 people ultimately lost their lives to that storm. Not hundreds. And that's not luck. That's a man staring at a radar screen, making the critical decision to issue a rare and urgent tornado emergency warning. The tornado that hit Greensburg was violent. It was historic before it even finished spinning. This was the first tornado in American history to earn a rating that didn't exist 6 months earlier. Think about that. A brand new scale, built to measure exactly this kind of nightmare. And the nightmare showed up almost immediately to prove the scale right. So let's set the scene. February 1st, 2007. The National Weather Service retires the old Fujita scale, the one meteorologists had used since the 1970s, and rolls out something called the Enhanced Fujita scale, EF for short. It's supposed to be more precise, more scientific, better at reading damage on the ground. Nobody expected it to get tested this fast. Nobody expected the first EF5 in American history just 3 months later. And nobody, absolutely nobody, expected it to happen at night in a town nobody outside Kansas had ever heard of. May 4th, 2007. A supercell thunderstorm builds over Comanche County, Kansas, the kind of storm that meteorologists watch with their stomach in a knot. At 9:03 p.m., it drops a tornado. Not a small one, not a warning shot one. This thing crosses into Kiowa County and starts growing and growing and growing. By the time it reaches its peak, this tornado is 7 miles wide. Consider that number for a second, because I don't think people process what that number actually means. The town of Greensburg was smaller than the tornado that hit it. You could not outrun this thing. You could not see the edges of it in the dark, because there were no edges within sight. It was wider than the whole town it was about to erase. So how does a storm like that hit a town and only take 11 lives instead of hundreds? Subscribe to this channel, because that answer is one of the most underrated hero stories in American weather history. Meet Mike Umscheid. He's a meteorologist working the night shift at the National Weather Service office in Dodge City, watching this storm develop on radar. And what he sees isn't just bad, it's catastrophic. The radar signature on this storm is about as ugly as it gets, the kind of red that makes a trained professional's blood run cold. Standard protocol says you issue a tornado warning. Umscheid looks at what's building over Kiowa County and decides standard protocol isn't enough. He issues something called a tornado emergency. This wasn't some routine box-checking exercise. It's a rare, urgent escalation, the kind of warning meteorologists reserve for the worst. Of the worst, when they believe lives are on the line in the next several minutes. Umscheid didn't wait for confirmation. He didn't hedge his language to cover himself if he was wrong. He looked at the data and made the call that mattered. And that call gave Greensburg residents 20 minutes. 20 minutes of advance warning before the tornado hit their town directly. 20 minutes doesn't sound like much, does it? But when a 7-mile wide tornado is bearing down on you in pitch darkness, 20 minutes is the difference between a basement and a body bag. 20 minutes is why this story isn't a tragedy about hundreds of families. It's a story about 11. At 9:45 p.m., the tornado slams directly into Greensburg. Homes, businesses, the water tower, the hospital, the school. 95% gone, not damaged, gone. Roofs peeled off like paper, walls collapsed into rubble. Entire blocks reduced to foundations with nothing standing on top of them. This is the kind of destruction that doesn't get fixed with insurance money and a construction crew. This is the kind of destruction that makes people ask if a town should even try to come back. Pam Muntz, a Greensburg resident, had a Cocker Spaniel named Sarah recovering from a routine surgery that night. Before she rushed her family down into the basement, she made sure Sarah was locked safely inside a wire kennel in the house. That's it. That's all she had time for. Then she went underground and the storm did what it did. When the family came back up, the entire upper level of their home was gone. Just gone. Roof, walls, furniture, all of it scattered across the county. But Sarah was alive. Her daughter found the kennel still intact, and somehow, in the middle of winds strong enough to level a town, a heavy coat rack had toppled directly over the top of that kennel. It shielded the dog from flying glass and debris. One dog, one coat rack, one impossible break in a night that offered almost none. Let's talk about what EF 5 inches actually means here, because this part matters and people get it wrong constantly. This was not an F5. The old Fujita scale was retired 3 months before this storm. This is an EF5, the very first one recorded under the new system, and ground surveyors confirmed the rating in May of 2007, after walking the wreckage and measuring the damage against the enhanced criteria. Winds hit an estimated 205 miles per hour, top of the scale, as violent as tornadoes get. This storm essentially became the proof of concept for a scale that had never been field tested against something this extreme. Scientists built a new measuring stick, and 3 months later, nature handed them the worst possible case to measure it against. Greensburg wasn't just a tragedy. It became a data point that shaped how every tornado since has been classified. If that number, 205 miles per hour, hit you the way it hit me, take a second and like this video. It genuinely helps get this story in front of more people. Most towns hit this hard just die. They shrink, they empty out. People move to the next county and never look back. Ghost towns across the Great Plains are full of names nobody remembers, places where a disaster hit and nobody bothered to rebuild. Greensburg had every reason to become one of those names. Instead, something completely different happened. Bob Dixon, freshly elected as mayor, stood in the wreckage of his own hometown and had to make a decision that would define the next 20 years. Rebuild small and quiet. Just get people back into houses as fast as possible? Or do something nobody in rural Kansas had tried before? Local leaders and residents stood in the wreckage of their own hometown and had to make a decision that would define the next 20 years. They convinced their grieving, shell-shocked community to rebuild from scratch and to do it green. Bob Dixon, who would be elected mayor a year later, became one of the biggest champions of this vision. Not green as some marketing gimmick. Green as in solar panels, wind turbines, and environmental building codes that most cities twice the size of Greensburg had never even considered. Think about the audacity of that pitch. You're standing in a town where 95% of the buildings are rubble, where people just lost their homes, their businesses, their neighbors. And someone stands up and says, let's rebuild this as one of the greenest towns in America. That's not a comfortable sell. That's a hard conversation with people who are exhausted and grieving. But it worked. December 2007, 7 months after the tornado nearly erased Greensburg from the map, the city council passes a resolution. Every municipal building larger than 4,000 square feet has to be rebuilt to the highest environmental standards available, not try to be efficient where possible. A hard requirement. Written into law while the town was still covered in debris. Did people push back? Of course they did. Rebuilding an entire town to green standards costs more money and takes more time than just throwing up whatever's cheapest and fastest. When you've lost your home and you're living in a temporary trailer, cheapest and fastest sounds pretty appealing. But Greensburg's leadership held the line, and slowly, building by building, a new town started rising out of what used to be rubble. By 2024, the results are hard to argue with. 100% of Greensburg's municipal electricity now comes from renewable wind energy. 100%. Not a goal, not a target for some future year. A fact, right now, in a town of several hundred people in rural Kansas that most Americans still couldn't find on a map. Homes across town are lined with solar panels. This isn't a pilot program. This is just how Greensburg runs. So subscribe if this kind of disaster into transformation story is the kind of thing you want more of, because Greensburg isn't finished proving its point. Let's sit with that for a second, because I think it gets lost in the numbers. A tornado wider than the town itself. 95% of everything destroyed in a matter of minutes. And the response wasn't to give up. It was to rebuild as the greenest town in the country. That's either completely reckless or genuinely visionary. Turns out it was both, and it worked anyway. Now here's the part of this story that should terrify you a little, because history nearly repeated itself. May 18th, 2025. 18 years, almost to the month after the original disaster. Another large supercell builds over the exact same region. This storm produces a family of 5 separate EF3 tornadoes across Kiowa County, and one of them, a large wedge tornado, crosses Highway 183 just south of Greensburg. A tornado emergency gets issued for Greensburg, only the second time in the town's history that warning level has ever been used. Can you imagine being a resident who lived through 2007, hearing that same phrase come through your radio again 18 years later? The tornado stayed far enough south and southeast to avoid the town directly, and there were 0 casualties in Greensburg from that storm. But for a few minutes on that night, Every person in that town had to wonder if they were about to live through the exact same nightmare twice. That near miss happened right on the edge of a milestone nobody in Greensburg was ignoring. In October of 2025, national news outlets started covering the town again, right on the eve of the 20-year mark since the original tornado. And the story they told wasn't about grief. It was about wind turbines and solar panels in a town that had turned total devastation into the most complete renewable energy system of any municipality its size in the country. So what do you actually take away from a story like this? A 20-minute warning saved hundreds of lives that could have been lost. A dog survived because of a coat rack nobody planned for. A brand new scale for measuring tornado violence got its first real test within 3 months of being created. And the storm that tested it hit the top of the chart. And a town that had. Every excuse to disappear instead became something almost nobody expected. Not rebuilt, reborn. And reborn smarter than it started. Greensburg should have been a name you only. Here in disaster documentaries, another dot on a map of places tornadoes erased. Instead, it's a name you hear in stories about what a community can choose to become after everything is taken from it. 11 lives lost is 11 too many, and nobody in that town would tell you otherwise. But hundreds of lives were saved because one meteorologist trusted his red on a radar screen more than he trusted the standard playbook. That's the story people forget. That's the story that deserves to be remembered, if any. Of this stuck with you, like and subscribe, because there's so much more history like this waiting to be uncovered.